Today on the show, I have the pleasure of speaking with Sunil Saxena. He's a lifetime long entrepreneur. He's started 6 successful businesses, mostly focused on real estate and real estate development. And he's been active in the DC real estate market since moving there in 2001. Now, he's been involved in acquisitions, construction, development, sales, and has completed over 100 projects, all from small rehabs to large multi-family development projects. Now, you want to know that Sunil is actually a former doctor, and he's a published author and speaker. And he spent 8 years in the medical field, and he retired from medicine in 2009, focusing all on now is ground-up construction. He grew up in Columbus, Ohio, and has 4 wonderful children, and his hobbies include tennis, golf, and comedy. G'day, Sunil. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today, mate?
Doing very, very well, Reed. Thank you for having me. Excited to share some time with you and talk to your listeners here.
Awesome, mate. Well, look, I already told people where you're dialing in from. You're in DC, right? But let's start the show, because I ask every single person who comes on the show to rewind the clock and tell me how they made their first ever dollar as a kid.
Well, I have an unusual journey, to say the least. I think people, whenever I tell them that I started in medicine, now I do real estate development, I also do comedy, their heads start spinning and they wonder what I'm all about. So I really made, believe it or not, my first dollar as a doctor. I started in medicine really young. I was 17 when I got into a 6-year medical program right out of high school. So I did that and graduated medical school when I was 23. And then did a 1-year residency, didn't like that field at all. So, but that was really my first dollar was during, getting paid as a resident, actually. So maybe a little more unusual than the average folks out there.
Yeah, I want to hear more about your comedy career, but tell me a little bit more about your upbringing with money. You're obviously clearly a smart person, because graduating and going straight from high school into a 6-year program and being done by the time you're 23 or 21, 23, it's very, very young. So how was your relationship with money growing up?
Well, I think we all have different relationships with money, as I think you're getting to here. My mom was a physician. My dad's an architect. So I grew up in actually a very small town in southern Ohio. So kind of a fish out of water. You're also sounds like a transplant from another country. When you kind of grow up here, you don't really know. You don't have your parents to tell you like this is how things are done. They don't know as well. So, I didn't grow up poor at all. But I think the fact that my parents were certainly not rich, but well off, and we live in a small town where the cost of living is, dirt cheap. I never really kind of understood the importance of money, if that makes sense.
Right.
I just was kind of always there. And then I didn't take it as seriously. And I think some of my initial, when I got into business, I had failures, as we all do. And that was because I didn't really understand the value of money. So these days I think that money is important, but it's certainly not the end goal of any entrepreneur. It shouldn't be. But yeah, that's kind of how I grew up. If that's what you're asking.
It's always interesting to hear folks' story. Usually how they go pursue real estate, pursue entrepreneurship is really from half the people who come on the show, more than half, probably 90% of the people who come on the show, pursue the life of real estate, financial freedom, because they come from a place of hardship, right? It sounds like you weren't in that space, which is completely fine. But it's also interesting to hear people who do come from maybe an immigrant type of family. You're growing up in a small rural town in Ohio. I could only imagine, looking like a sore thumb,
right.
Sticking out like a sore thumb. So, but tell me, what was there a push from mum and dad to get into medicine and be, high achiever? Because it clearly sounds like you, at 17 years of age, you came out guns blazing.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of interesting because I don't necessarily recommend a 6-year program for anybody, because, you kind of get locked in right out of high school. The traditional medical model is you go to college for 4 years, then you do 4 years of medical school. So it's an 8-year model. And a lot of people take time off somewhere in between and do other things. I don't know if it was really pressure. It was just kind of, from an Indian background, which, I don't know if you figured that out already or not.
Sunil didn't give it away at all.
Yeah, exactly. You'd be surprised at how many people are like, what is that? I'm like, you don't know really? So yeah, clearly medicine is like our thing, right? I mean, every time I go to a hospital myself, there seems to be just all the doctors are Indian. So it was just kind of like my parents really thought that was the best way to go from their upbringing back in India. And I got into this program and, everyone was like validating me. They're like, oh, congratulations, you got in this program. You're going to be a doctor. Oh my God. So I was like, wow, this is great. So I don't think I knew back then at all. Clearly that wasn't my, reason for being on this earth, but it was just something I kind of got into. I don't really regret it. I don't think they pushed me into it. But really I did things in reverse because most people, when, they graduated at 23 from college, and then they maybe kind of find themselves and, work different jobs. I graduated from medical school at 23. Then I took 4 years off and kind of just tried to find myself and realized I was more of an entrepreneur. So yeah, that was a little bit of a different kind of path for sure.
Talk to me about those 4 years off, because it sounds like it's quite life-changing. I would say, like, what did you do in 4 years to go and discover yourself?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I graduated at 23. I did 1 year of orthopedic surgery, actually, which is a really, really sought after profession. It's one of the top, types of medical specialties. But I was burnt out, I think, looking back on it. And of course, hindsight's 2020, right? You look back like, oh, that's exactly what happened when I was experiencing. And I was like, I don't even know why I'm doing all this. But I was definitely burnt out after 6 years of just nonstop, medical and college and everything. Because what that program does is it takes college and condenses into 2 years. So it's really intense. And then the medical school part is just medical school. And then going right into a surgical specialty, which is also very intense. I was done and I just quit, and I didn't really like it also. So in those 4 years, that's when I started my acting and comedy. I lived in New York for a year. I think I went to New Jersey area, lived with my uncle for, I don't remember exactly how long, that 4 years. And then really kind of realized that I kind of have this entrepreneurial itch and bug. And that's kind of what I'm about. I'm really good at like taking ideas and figuring out maybe how to make money or setting a strategy. But yeah, I mean, that's really what I did. And, I actually ended up going back to residency after that because I still wanted to kind of finish my medical training. So from 4 years off, then 3 years of residency, and that put me here in DC right afterwards in 2001.
Nice. And that 4 years off comedy acting would have been such a 180-degree shift from medicine, right? It's interesting that you probably, I don't want to say rebellion is the right word, but you have that sense of discovering yourself, like exploration, curiosity, that, you have something within you that you want to go and scratch that itch that, because just from an outsider, just meeting you, like medicine, and then you just like completely shift to acting and comedy. And I've got great friends who are also from Indian backgrounds. I could only imagine mum and dad doing backflips.
They're still doing those flips. I'm like 50 plus and they're still flipping.
No, it's interesting that everyone goes through a stage of self-awareness, self-awakening. And I encourage anyone young. I've meet so many young entrepreneurs. They're like, I want to get into, multifamily. I want to do it. I was like, how old are you? He's like, I'm 22. He's like, go backpacking around the world for 2 years.
I'm with you, Reed. I mean, I definitely agree with you 100%.
Yeah. So, but anyway, let's walk into how you got involved in real estate and why the transition out of medicine, and maybe walk the listeners through what you've built today.
Yeah, I mean, again, during that 4 years, I kind of realized that, I still love acting and comedy. I still try to do it. I haven't done it since pre-COVID. Now it's been a couple of years, but I just realized I'm an entrepreneur at heart. So I got to build businesses. I didn't really have a bent towards real estate. I actually did some stuff in the restaurant business, the restaurant world. I did, I had a painting and remodeling company, which actually, I guess, does lead to construction. But I was a chief medical officer for a medical device company for 4 years. I also, with my ex-wife, started 2 very successful dental practices. So I wasn't like, real estate. Again, I keep going back to the entrepreneur word. That's kind of what I really think I'm at heart. But I just realized that real estate is the best of all of those businesses. It really is. You can't beat the amount of money you can make and the financial freedom you can achieve. You can make millions of dollars being a dentist. You can't make $1 billion being a dentist. You just can't. You can, what was I just, as a painting and remodeling company, again, you can make a couple million, but you can't make $1 billion. Mm-hmm. So real estate really has almost an unlimited ceiling if you want to, that's the way I look at it. So I really feel that, I personally feel everybody, all your listeners, you should be involved with real estate in some form or fashion, because it just has such income potential and wealth building potential. Whether you're completely passive and you're just investing with someone like myself or you, and you have your day job, or you are, full-time active like you and me, or somewhere in the middle, buy some rental properties, hang on to them. But the power of real estate is you just can't find that in any other business, in my opinion. I know IT in those areas, you can make a lot of money. You can go broke too. So I think real estate has a lot of power to make money, but it also is, I don't know what the right word is, but it's a relatively stable, known way. I'm sure when you buy a multifamily property, you kind of know what you're getting into, right? One of the examples I give is when I started some restaurants, and when those didn't do well, that was one of my initial failures where I was like, oh, wow, this is like not just playtime. You kind of lose everything because all the equipment in a restaurant is worth essentially nothing when it goes out of business, versus even if I get into a real estate deal and it kind of goes quote unquote bad, it's like maybe you lose 10%, it's not like so I think there's just, I could talk forever about this, but I think there's just so many advantages of real estate that it's a no brainer that that's the field that, that everyone should be in some form or fashion.
Well, I do want to, we can just keep talking about it, but I think I just want to talk briefly about the realization of getting out of medicine. When was that aha moment? Like, I had enough.
It was during that 4 years off, really. I mean, I kind of, again, I have a very unusual life path. So most people find themselves first and then go into something intense like medicine. I just kind of was put through this. So that realization, that period of, everyone goes through figuring out themselves, that was delayed till after. And that was part of it too. I'll be honest. I mean, I don't know if there's any physicians listening, but one of the problems with switching out of medicine is your identity as a doctor. You're a doctor now. And when you go to a real estate conference, something people are like, what, you're a realtor now? You're a doctor that turned realtor? And I'm like, no, that's not quite. No. I've heard that so many times. So I think part of that, finding myself, part of the difficulty was, I'm already a doctor and now you're going and doing comedy and act. What's wrong with you? And not only my parents, of course, but, anybody you meet. But I definitely knew in that 4 year period, this was not my end goal. Even when I went back to residency, I kind of did it just to finish my education. I knew the entire time I was not going to practice. And as soon as I finished residency, I got a job in medicine to pay the bills. But then I started, various side businesses that eventually led me to, leave medicine full time.
That's incredible. Now, as we pivot to this sort of next chapter of your life, this sort of throwing spaghetti against the wall, restaurants and dental practices and painting businesses.
Yeah.
What are some of the big lessons you took away? You mentioned just earlier that you have a restaurant and you have a bunch of equipment and it goes bad. Well, it's worthless, right? It's worth nothing because you're not producing any product out of it and people aren't coming through the door to pay you for that product. So maybe explain to the listeners some of those big lessons learned from these different array of companies that you've started over the years.
Yeah, again, this is I'm enjoying this conversation a lot because I love talking about this kind of stuff. So I wish someone would have told me this stuff back when I was 18, 19, early 20s. I think on a personal level, the very first thing that's so important is figuring out what I call your Dharma. I'm actually working on my third book right now, and it's called Dharma Wars. It's about this concept. It's a concept from like 3000 BC. So my people way back, well before Christ and all this stuff. It's a concept of kind of like why you were put on this earth. So it's not just like your passion, but it's a mixture of kind of passion and your talents and everything. So, again, the example we give, is like, the grass was put on this earth to grow. That's what it does. Cows were put on this earth to give milk. The interesting thing is that like every living organism on this earth, except human beings, follows their dharma to a T. A dog, but it doesn't matter what you're doing. The dog's going to be a dog. He could be, at the Super Bowl. He could be in front of 10,000 people. He doesn't care. He's a dog. Human beings, we think and we change our dharma. We're like, oh my God, what will my parents think? What will people think? As soon as you put a microphone on somebody, they start acting differently. So I think you have to figure that out. Why were you put on this earth? So that's the first step. Figure that out. And again, I'm not saying the restaurant business is good or bad, but I wasn't put on this earth to do that business. Other people love it, and that's what they do. Jose Andres is a perfect example of a guy who's just crushed it and has done great things. So I think that's step one. If you're asking me from a business standpoint, then it's really, to me, it's like think like an investor, right? Like you're going to invest X amount of capital into any business, whether it's dentistry or restaurants or real estate. What is your return you're getting? Right. So even when I analyze real estate deals now, that's my very first number I'm looking at is what is my return on my investment? If it's above a certain threshold, I'll go further. Okay, this deal meets my criteria. If it's below that threshold, I'm just like, I got kind of better things to do. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that was a lot of.
No. I think I can unpick that a little bit because I want to use your example, your life story. You talk about Dharma, right? D-A-R-M-A.
D-H-A-R-M, Dharma.
So
it's like karma, but Dharma.
Got it. But I think you trying all the things and people listening to this show is a form of going out and figuring out what that Dharma is, right? And that's the beauty of your 20s. That's right. Why you have youth on your side. And I encourage anyone. I backpacked across the world for 2.5 years after uni. I loved it. I would do it in a heartbeat, the simplicity of it, the meeting the people, but you really get to find out who you are as a person, right? And to your point of why you're put on this earth. So I think, using your examples as starting the restaurant business, starting the dental business, starting the contracting and painting business is part of figuring out who you are, right? And having your release of comedy and acting, it's such a, you're like a one-man band. You're playing the trombone, you're doing the drums, and you're also singing as well. You're a triple threat. So I just wanted to reiterate that for investors, for the people listening, because it is important to have these experiences in life. And I meet so many people who come across my podcast or just come and ask me about questions, and they always, they might be a little bit older in life, and they always, I wish I got started sooner. I'm like, stop beating yourself up. That was your journey. Own it. That's going to be part of who you are. If it took you a little bit longer, that's okay. There's still another 40 years of life worth living. Go out and start today. So I just want to sort of bring it around to back to what you're saying in the Dharma, because it is so important that not just no one has it figured out. We're all still figuring it out, right? And we like to think that we have that North Star picked. But I remember when I got involved in real estate, the whole thing was getting out of the day job, working for myself. That was my North Star. I achieved that when I was 31 years of age. Right. Then I was like, what's my new North Star?
Exactly.
Like, what am I doing now? I'm in the real estate. What's next? And I think that's the beauty of being an entrepreneur, right? And self-discovery and understanding who you are, because you'll constantly over the time. I know that I'll change in 10 years' time when I'm 45, I'll probably think a little differently to now when I'm 35. And when I'm 55, it'll be even different. So being okay with that, I think, is also another pressure valve that we have to release. So do you want to talk about any of that? Because it sounds like there was a little hint of pressure coming out when you're 17. I could pick up that you wanted to go and release that a little bit, because and give yourself the permission to say, I need to be curious in these other aspects of my life to figure out who I am and back to my Dharma.
Right. No, I want to read. Basically, there's a number of very, very important points you said in there as you were talking. Number one is, don't feel like, if you really don't know what you want to do and you don't feel like you figured out your Dharma, take your time, because it's much better to spend a couple of years doing that, even 5 years doing that, than jump into something. And then like I did, I kind of jumped into medicine. So I highly would not recommend going all the way through a medical career to realize you don't want to be a doctor. Try to figure that out, way back then, and, really realize, are you, really, is this what you want to do? I remember again, before COVID, so I'm losing all my years, but maybe 3-4 years ago, I gave a speech to high school students. And I think when I talked about Dharma, it really lit up their eyes, because one girl, I still remember her in the audience. She's like, she already decided she was going to medical school. And when I gave that thing, she's like, why am I doing this? And then at least got her wheels thinking. So I think that's a very important point you made. Don't put the pressure on yourself. The other important point is actually when people tell me that I don't know what I want to do, I recommend travel. That's exactly what I recommend. I think that's one of the best ways to really find yourself, experiencing different cultures, different people, just getting out of this, even in the United States, I mean, we're pretty homogeneous here, but going to different states is even a different experience. But I highly recommend going international. So I love what you said that you did. You said 2 years doing backpacking. That's probably when you figured yourself out, and you're a much better person for it coming out of that, instead of other people look at it as, oh, it's a waste of time, and why are you doing all that stuff? I have another fairly good friend here in DC where he did the same thing after college. He spent a year and just traveled the world. His daughter was doing that while I was talking to him last time I met him. So his daughter is doing the same thing, just traveling the world for 1 year. So I think, again, the bottom line is figure out your Dharma, whatever it takes to do that. If it takes you all of your 20s, if it takes you 1 year of your 20s, if it takes traveling, whatever it takes, try different things. I think did it in a kind of expensive way, meaning I really dove into stuff instead of just sampling. I bought the ice cream store and then realized I didn't want this store. I couldn't agree with, everything you're saying is 100% spot on. So,
I'm still living abroad. I'm 36 years of age. I haven't lived at home since I was 21. So I'm still backpacking. But Sunil, tell me what you're working on today. You're in the development space. You're working in DC. Give us a little snapshot of the projects you're working on there, because I happen to come from a structural engineering background. I know ground up construction really, really well. So would love to talk a bit of shop about that.
Yeah, basically, I've I've done small. I started with small rehabs. That's kind of what really gave me the financial power to get out of medicine. But then I started a new home building company, which I still have, Saxena Custom Homes. I've only got 2 homes going right now. But then what I really realized is the money is in the kind of larger multifamily projects. That's all we're doing right now. I have. I think it's for about 16 projects going right now. We have about 200 units in development total. We're just building the business right now. We're in growth mode. We think 6 months ago had maybe 2 or 3 people on our team. Now we're at like 10 plus people.
That's awesome.
And we're starting to look at other opportunities as well, like Airbnb and short-term rentals. I really like that space, where we have a couple in Florida right now, and we're trying to get some in DC right now. I'm sure I'm missing something.
In terms of size, you mentioned multi. Are you sort of sub 10? What are you building? Infill lots. You're coming in and doing highest and best use, and I can explain to listeners what all that means. But I'm imagining DC difficult to get things approved because it's a major city like LA, like New York, like San Francisco. You've got historical, conditions you've got to go through. So just describe to the listeners, what's a typical project look like for you?
Yeah, there's essentially no raw land left in DC. I mean, you can certainly find something, but essentially let's call it no raw land. So you're always taking the existing structure and you're basically trying to maximize the square footage.
Yep.
So for anybody who wants to get into development or is thinking about that, very first thing to understand is zoning. Get good at zoning. That's where you make your money. And again, when I start talking about zoning, people's eyes go like, oh my God, but it's really not that hard if you just go to whatever jurisdiction you want you're operating in and just literally go and click on their different zoning. And just, again, I'm not saying becoming an expert in it, but understanding, why, how the zoning works and what is different in a commercial and a residential and what are the setbacks and all these kind of things. I have an example of a project. We're actually just about to finish it out. It's 2 homes that we're building. And I'm trying to think how this worked. We went to, actually the neighbor was going to buy it. He went to like his architect. Architect said, nope, you can't do this. We went to our architect and said, no, you can't do this. And our real estate agent, who was very smart, who I've been working with for over 10 years, read the zoning code and she realized the problem was the frontage. You didn't have enough frontage to subdivide the lot. But she said that she read in the code that the frontage can be measured 15 feet back and it's a pie-shaped lot. So the frontage goes up as you go back. Mm-hmm. So it did work when you measured it 15 feet back. And we went back to our architect and we said, well, are you sure about this? He's like, actually, you guys are right. So that project has, been a year. It's been a little bit of a stressful project for other reasons. But again, just knowing zoning is what got us that project, for example. And so again, no zoning. And really what we're doing is basically understanding, in this building, I can, go up, I can go back, I can go down. Here's what I can do. Here's what I can't do. And then we just run numbers. And if the deal works, we build it. If it doesn't, we don't. So
what are you seeing today in terms of your numbers? Because everyone's talking about supply chain and the cost of construction going up. So what are you seeing in the DC area, price per square foot? And it's a loaded question because I know based on your finishes can depend on how big your price per square foot is on the build side.
So I mean, it's definitely changed in the last 2 years. That's been probably one of the biggest challenges we've had during COVID is that prices are just going way up. Plus, you can't even get stuff. I mean, windows right now, last I heard, were like 6 months out. I can't even get a window here for 6 months. It's crazy. Before it was like 2 weeks, you'd have windows. So we're building, I mean, again, like you said, it's really finishes area. What are you doing? The density makes a difference between price per square foot. If I have huge, big bedrooms, then my price per square foot goes down. If I have like tiny units with like a lot of kitchens and baths, those of course are more expensive to build. But we're anywhere between like, 150 to maybe 250 a square foot build. Again,
single story, or that's multiple stories?
DC, the sweet spot in DC is like it's 5 stories, but 4 stories above grade.
Yep.
And then a basement. That's a sweet spot because anytime you go above that, you have to change your construction type, and then it gets just much more like concrete and all that gets more complicated.
Yep.
And we can do those with no elevators, which again adds cost, and we can do it all stick built.
Yep. For everyone listening, structural engineering, you maximize your stick build at five stories. So you'll see a lot of podium projects where they build a parking garage and they go 5, sometimes 6 if you can squeeze it. But yeah, stick build is quite limited. That's incredible. So and talk to me about why you've chosen to just be the master of DC and not go into more affordable areas, which you kind of don't live too far away from.
Well, I always keep looking at other areas, but I keep coming back to DC as much as I love and hate it. I've got a love-hate relationship with DC. If you look at even like Boston Properties, which I think is one of the largest in the world developers, if not in the US, they're only in 5 markets. So that's really my theory or the way I run my business is I feel like being a specialist. I mean, there's so much to do in DC. I could make $1 billion right here in DC. So it's just, I feel like my leverage, like what do I bring to the table? Is I'm a DC expert. I pretty much know like every stupid little nuance. And, I know people I can call, I just kind of know how to get stuff done in DC. And it's not always the best or the fun, it's a lot of regulation. I always say that, like Florida, what is their major export is sunshine. Maybe LA is Hollywood movies. DC, we're government. We export government. We're just good at like government and laws and regulations. And that's what just everything here is about that. So I guess that's just what I feel like is my advantage is I just know DC and other people literally they'll just shut their eyes when you hear DC. We've even got contractors who I work with in Virginia. I live in Northern Virginia, which is about just 15 minutes from DC, but they refuse to even come to DC. Like, nope, I don't work in DC. So you've got a lot. I mean, it gives me an advantage because I know that area, so that there's less competition and that kind of thing. So I found it a good niche. It works really well. I think we've got a huge amount of growth here that we can experience. I haven't found a reason to leave DC yet.
That's awesome. And how are you? I should retract that statement. So a lot of people who listen to this show are all about buying existing large multifamily. That's what I do across multiple countries and multiple states, multiple MSAs to build that cash flow. So in the development space, I know because I spent 5 years as a developer working for guys here in LA and 10 years before that as a structural engineer. Development is very labor intensive in terms of your staffing, right? Mm-hmm. It's not. I can run a 5,000 unit portfolio with 3 or 4 people. You couldn't run 4 projects with 3 or 4 people. You need probably depending on the complexity of a project, you might have a person per project or a project manager per project. So, and it's very long entitlement process, long construction risk. So, how are you making a profitable business out of that when it's so lumpy in terms of the payday cash flow and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, that kind of goes back to the basic business, things. I mean, I think anybody who wants to do this, as a business, I mean, again, if someone's investing with you or investing with me and, that's just you're a pure investor, or if you're buying a few rental properties, you're not really a business person, I wouldn't say. I mean, you're just kind of doing it. But really, I mean, you got to understand cash flow. You have to understand human resources. I mean, building an A team can basically maybe the make or break in a business. I've done that in all the businesses I've done that. You really need those A players. So it's like basically, creating a good culture, getting the right people on board, making sure you have cash. These are the jobs of a CEO. That is, I mean, for sure, one of the most, difficult parts about being a developer is the cash flow is very lumpy, as you said. But we have construction draws for all our projects, so we do get paid during different phases of the project. But again, even that is not like we're getting every 2 weeks we're getting money. It's just and
that's when you get to construction, right? That's not even the entitlement stuff that you got to get through, which could take years potentially.
Correct. Yeah. So yeah, that's definitely a challenge in this business for development. If you don't want to manage cash flow and that kind of scares you, then yeah, don't be a developer. But it's very different than like a restaurant business where like literally every day the cash register is ringing and your net proceeds by the end of the day or the next morning. But yeah, it's just one of those things that cash flow management is a kind of an important skill that a CEO must have for any business, whether it's dental or or whatever day-to-day type of business, or a more like a development type of business.
100%. So you mentioned earlier you just brought on some more people. Where are you headed in 2022 and beyond, and what's the goal for you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, what we ended up doing is, if I just look back the last few years, is we kind of overgrew a little bit. We grew too fast. We didn't have the right people. So the last, I think 6 to 9 months, we really haven't even taken on a new project. Before that, we were taking on almost like one new project a month. That was our schedule. So we were about 12 new projects a year. So I think we're probably by second half of this year, probably by Q3, we'll start looking for new projects. I have another company where I do some small projects on the side, but that's different. But the main business, I think we're still kind of building that team and getting all those kinks worked out. So I think once we have that, we'll just kind of resume our one project a month. Then we'll eventually try to get to 2 projects a month, just kind of keep ratcheting up. We do, one of the things I think real wealth in real estate is built by holding real estate, not just doing what I do in terms of build, sell, probably, kind of what you're doing. So we're also going to start like certain percentage of what we develop, we're going to hold for the long term. We just haven't quite gotten there yet. But again, probably by end of this year, we'll start doing more of that.
That's incredible. And then we come through cycles, right? People talk about cycles all the time, and when's the best time to develop and when's the best time to buy and hold and all that sort of stuff. Are you agnostic to the market cycles because you're so deep in one market that you can make money in any market, in any cycle, I should say?
Yeah, that's one of the huge advantages of the DC market. That's again why I keep, when I started, my business partner actually, one of my business partners, they live in Florida, and we were looking at development down there just because I like to be down there too. But it's just that cycle, that area is just so up and down with development that you start a project today based on today's numbers, 2 years later, it could be like double or it could be half. DC is a very, very, one of probably the most stable markets in the country, if not the world, to be honest. Even during the 2008 crisis, which I lived through, believe it or not, DC proper was only down about 4%. Even the suburbs of DC, where I actually had my home, we were down about 30%. Areas of Florida were down 90%. So that means a house that was $300,000 was worth $30,000. So that's one of the reasons I like it. We definitely have our micro fluctuations here, like every 3 to 6 months, and also based on the political calendar and defense spending, you'll start seeing markets go up or down a little bit here. But in general, I think there's, again, I hate to say that there's no market risk because there's always market risk as a developer, but it's relatively stable here in DC. Even during COVID, we saw things go up like significantly. So, a lot of big cities like New York, where they're experiencing like kind of a down market during this last couple of years. We have an up market going on. I think we went up so much that now we're starting to see a little bit of a plateau right now. So yeah, I don't really try to time the market or play the market. I don't think anybody can do that. And the more people tell you they can do that, the less they know really typically. So I think we just develop and, sometimes we end up selling something in a super hot market. We make more than we thought. The last project we closed out, we were like 300,000 or 400,000 above pro forma because the market was just super hot when we went to sell. But we're pretty conservative in our pro formas. And if the market is like today, the market's a little, I call it cool in DC, but it's compared to the rest of the world, it's probably great. But we get spoiled here. If something doesn't sell in like 10 days, we're like, oh my God, what's wrong with the project, or the condo unit. So I don't know, I'm kind of being long-winded here, but I think the bottom line is that's one of the reasons I like DC is because it's a relatively stable market, and there's always an undersupply of real estate in DC proper.
Yeah, well, the reason why I was going with that question is it sounds like you believe we're at the new floor. The market's gone up so much, you don't think it's going to come back down again in general? Like, do you have any opinions on that nationwide?
I've got opinions, but I try not to. I try to be not one of those guys who's like, acting like I know what. Because bottom line, we really don't know, right? Interest rate seems to be creeping up. We've got a lot of instability in the world. I think our good old Mr. Biden, who just took this office he's just probably about 10 minutes from here. He's probably hanging out doing something right now. I think he's got a lot of policies that aren't good that have really affected real estate and business. But I think what you're going to see in the midterm elections in the next presidential cycle is he's not going to be there. So I think it's going to revert back to some little bit better, more sane policies. So I think you just never know, right? That's the problem is you just don't know. I don't think we could have predicted this kind of war I think we could have actually predicted this war. People have been saying this for 10 years, but the timing of it. So there's so many world events that you just can't predict that I think you just have to kind of find a business model that works, stick with it, be able to have a plan B if things really do get bad, which we do always. And, just kind of whatever. You can never be 100%.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, mate, look, I want to thank you for jumping on the show today. And then at the end of every show, we like to dive into the top 5 investing tips. Ready to get into it?
Let's do it. I'll do my best.
Mate, question number 1 is, what's the daily habit you practice to keep on track towards your goals?
There's a lot. I think developing a morning routine. If you haven't read Miracle Morning, read that book. I think it's great. Have some kind of morning routine that kind of gets you going and into the right state.
Nice. Question number 2 is, who'd be the most influential person in your career to date?
Honestly, 2 people. I think Tony Robbins, I think, has really helped me along the way, like significantly. I think that guy is the Michael Jordan of whatever, coaching or whatever you want to call it. And believe it or not, the very first book I read that kind of got me excited about real estate was Trump's book, Art of the Deal. I got to think back what year I read that thing, but it was sometime in the early 90s. Yeah. So I know the T word or the Trump word is not very popular with a lot of circles, but all I can say is that I read his book at a fairly young age, and that kind of really got me excited about being an entrepreneur and being a real estate developer.
Nice. Question number 3 is, what's the most influential tool in your business? And when I say tool, it could be a physical tool like a phone or a journal, or it could be a piece of software that you just can't run the business without. What is it?
Yeah. I should have prepared for these podcast questions that you're going to tell me. I don't know. I would just say, I know I'm giving you some weirdo answers here, but I think books. I'm I think books have changed my life, and maybe it's not a tool, but I still actually this week I really was into, I had a lot of extra time. So I read 3 books this week already. I try to read 4 a month is my goal. I recommend everybody read at least 1 a month. That's one of the reasons I wrote 2 books, is because I want to try to share my knowledge, at least help, whoever I can help. So I think, reading on a regular basis and educating yourself and improving, then I'm able to take that knowledge and then help my business. So that's the best answer I can give you.
Being a consistent learner and constantly being a student is really, really important. So awesome stuff. Question number 4 is, in one sentence, what has been the biggest failure that you've learned in your career, and what did you take away from that failure?
I think, I've had a lot of failures. So I think that's one of the things people think is people that are successful don't fail. I think it's absolutely, completely untrue. My very first business, when I got into restaurants, failed miserably, and that's where I learned a lot. So I think, to me, just understanding that failure is a critical ingredient in success. You have to fail to be successful. So don't look at failure as failure, which has a negative connotation. Look at it as learning. That's where I think that's also changed my perspective, that every time I fail, I don't, oh my God, I failed, I suck, I'll never do this kind of attitude. Just say, look, here's what I learned. Let's not make that mistake again, and let's just move forward. So I think that's probably my biggest thing, is just learning that failure isn't a bad word.
Right. No, I completely agree that having failure in your life is going to set you up for better success in the future, because you get to learn from that failure. Last question, mate, is, where can people reach you to continue the conversation that want to be in your sphere? Where do they go?
Yeah, go to my main website, hyperfastdevelopment.com. That's our main website, and there's a contact us button. So if you are interested in learning more, or want to get in touch with me, or you want to invest with us, just go to that website, hyperfastdevelopment.com, and the contact us information is right there.
Awesome stuff, mate. Well, look, I want to thank you so much for jumping on today's show. I want to reflect some of the things that I took away from today's show that I think really sums you up as a person. I think curiosity always seems to be a word on this show. Like, people are so curious about things that they want to go and discover. And I love what you talked about earlier when we talked about the Dharma and understanding why you've been put on this planet, and just looking at your incredible history of all the things you try to be curious about, your acting, your medicine, your comedy, and then developing other businesses around restaurants and just continually trying to unturn that rock to really get to the nuts and bolts of who you are and where you're going to be. And hopefully now you're in a space that you're really, really quite, I guess what the word is, you're not self-soothing, but you have a calm about yourself that you're on the right path in this career, after coming through so many incredible careers that you've only learnt more from to help you get to where you are today. So I think that's been incredible. And I think also just your ability to keep very hyper local in the DC market to help you understand what is going to be how you make money. And it's a great example of so many people listening to this show. They always go to the next shiny object. Where's the next hot market? Or where's the next hot state that's blowing up, and knowing that you can always make money in your backyard. You just got to figure out how. So yeah, did I leave anything out?
No. I also definitely appreciate you having me on the show. It's enjoyable talking to you, and maybe we'll get to meet in person one day.
I hope so, my friend. I hope so. Well, look, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. Enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll catch up very, very soon.
Thank you. Take care.
Well, there you have it. Another cracking episode jam-packed with some incredible advice from Sunil. If you do want to check him out, go over to hyperfastdevelopment.com. He has a plethora of information over there. Get your hands on some of his books and just be in his sphere, because he's clearly a guy that you got a lot to learn from with his life experiences. And I'm sure a lot of people are going to be listening back to this show, rewinding, taking down notes. I want to thank everyone for taking some time out of your day to tune in to continue to grow your financial IQ, because that's what we're all about here on this show. If you do like the show, the easiest way to give back is to give it a 5-star review on iTunes. All the links from today's show will be up on my website at reedgoosens.com. And we're going to do it all again next week. So remember, be bold, be brave, and go give life a crack.